Hi everyone, so I'm finally home again, and as I had mentioned in my last video, I've been on vacation the last week and now we're back. I just spent a few hours video crafting, talking, discussing about the possible Season 27 builds, setups, and all the juicy stuff that we will see on the PTR very soon. So it will go live tomorrow and I'm very excited to try it out. I think the season looks actually way better than I had thought on first sight. And I'm really pumped for a lot of things that I want to highlight here. So I have a bunch of the free planners for you ready to jump into testing. They're not like, 100% optimized necessarily, but they should give you a bit of a pointer. So if you want to try out the new Trag'Oul, the new Akkhan, the new Tal Rasha, all that stuff, I got it, and a bit more. And it looks like it's going to be really funny. So there is definitely a lot of potential to absolutely annihilate without any remorse, without any traces left, those PTR servers with some of those effects. And I also want to kind of like, show you the humorous side of those things at least. If you have already checked out those PTR notes, then you might have seen some potential for that yourself. So we don't really know how most of these effects will work, what are like internal cooldowns and all these kind of things. But there are definitely some things there, I guess it will be obvious to most people that it will create insane amounts for Phalanx. So, shooting 20 missiles is going to be ridiculous with something like the magic missile here. And you can stack up multiple dots on all of your enemies with that. You can have the Firebird's dot on top of it. We have the Arcane Orbit that it sounds like it could potentially give you something like 20 explosions every time you press Arcane Orbit, and you can do that twice a second. We have stuff like Army of the Dead Unconventional Warfare that might or might not actually constantly hit everything around you all the time, like 10 times a second. We even have stuff like the Way of the 100 Fists here that makes it so that you can potentially punch like 100 or 200 times a second or something like that into like a pack of enemies. I don't expect that much will really come out of it, but it will be potentially very funny to see the effects that this might have. For example, with the Fist of Fury rune that used to be the way to proc static charge. So you usually had two different generators, static charge that you apply as a debuff to the enemy, and then you use Fist of Fury because of the super high proc coefficient and the fast attack speed. I think one really powerful and also really laggy effect will be the Wave of Light one. So Wave of Light is already, like hitting the entire screen, and now you can have 7 bells and you can hit those bells potentially faster than your regular attack speed, and they will all like proc those Wave of Light explosions. Not just that, but there's also the Lightning Wave of Light rune that is already laggy with, just like 1.8 attacks per second on its own. That will like absolutely melt servers. I can't wait for that. And potentially some more things like this crackling blast hammer on the Crusader. And obviously we shouldn't forget a Strafe, Ball Lightning, Marauder, Demon Hunter that could potentially shoot like 40 ball lightnings all over the place per second that continuously zaps everything at a slow pace. So I can't wait to see all that in action. We did have some really funny PTRs lately with Season 25 Soul Shards, for example, or even like the Season 21 theme and all that. But I think this time around it's gonna be many glorious clips to see. Anyway, I already highlighted some of those more interesting effects here. And I also want to show you a bit of like the setups of what I actually had in mind. If you want, for example, to jump in and try out the new DMO, for example, with the Arcane Orbit, that looks quite promising. Potentially you can also do this with Frozen Orb or any other Arcane Orb rune. But I guess this is going to be the one, at least for Season 27. In general, it seems like there will be a bunch of, so to say, Season 27 only builds. So some builds that will basically be only playable this time around, or at least only viable this time around, because of those insanely powerful effects that, boost those builds more than others, and potentially also completely change the way they work, like this strafe, hatred spender stuff that you simply cannot replicate without the season theme. So there's going to be a bunch of things like that. We have to see what exactly we're going to do about like the build guides for those. So if you want to try out this Arcane Orbit, this is a build that was played many years ago at this point. I don't know what, like Season 4 or so for the Wizards. So it's like a melee build. You have the barrier blades to stack up your shields. There's a bunch of other shield effects like galvanizing ward, deflection, Ashnagar. And you just like try to attack as fast as possible, stack up those shields, and then you spam Arcane Orb twice per second. And this new effect makes it so that all the Arcane Orbits, orbs explode at the same time. So you have to recast it very frequently. And then you have a bunch of other effects like teleport, you cast the slow times automatically now. You can get a spell steal here to get a bit of a damage boost. And then other typical stuff like Halo of Karini. So that's the idea here. I don't think that's going to be like one of the top builds, but it would definitely be, you know, pretty solid. Just gut feeling wise, I would say it's going to land somewhere in A tier. But again, depends on the exact mechanics of those new effects. Here we have the Akkhan Condemn Phalanx Crusader. So Akkhan used to be played with Bombardment, and this is now going to be a Condemn build exclusively pretty much. You can still play Bombardment, but it's going to be mega scuffed. You're going to be squishy as hell. You're not going to have Akkhan's champion up very much. So realistically, not really. And with the changed set, you have Phalanx in the build now. So there are two different setups that I made here. So we have a Baleful Remnant setup, where you have this weapon that gives you up to 8 extra like avatars basically from Phalanx. You have Eternal Union that makes them last forever. And you also get another 3 avatars from the Falling Sword. So you have 11 summons and you have 4 from the Bowman skill itself. And they all last forever and they will attack and proc condemns all over the place. Again, this is also one of those builds where you're just gonna see like explosions everywhere. You can get a Task Earth Theo in there for even more explosions. You're gonna have like 50 condemns a second or so in like a good scenario. It's gonna be pretty hilarious to see that as well, I guess. But aside from the meme factor, I think this is also gonna be a pretty solid build. Condemn is already not really that terrible. It's like C tier. And if you just take this Akkhan and then multiply the amount of explosions by like 20 or something, yeah, it actually has quite some potential, I believe. So I think this is going to be immediately one of the best builds. The playstyle is going to be very weird though. So essentially you just run around with your army and yeah, sometimes you go into horse maybe. You press the Akkhan's champion on cooldown. And you don't really press Condemn, you don't really press any attack whatsoever. The only thing you're spamming is Judgment. And this will like immediately make everything crowd control immune. So you just try to use this as a means of healing yourself. I'm not even sure if you will even be able to stack Stricken right now, but I just put it in there because generally Condemn has pretty weak single target, but this might not be such an issue with, you know, your whole army charging at the Rift Guardian. So maybe you're actually gonna change that. But yeah, there might be some adjustments, just like as a basic idea here of the setup. Here is something that also looks extremely promising. This is the Magic Missile Firebird. I tried to make the setup here and I was realizing this is actually exactly the same as Flame Blades. I actually forgot to change the name here because I just copy pasted the entire planner from Flame Blades and mostly just swapped out Magic Missile. So this is literally it. And you're gonna have obviously this new Sanctified Power that gives you 20 Magic Missiles. And then you have the Conflag rune that makes it a fire spell that works with the set. And this is basically it. So you just integrate as always, and then you spam Magic Missiles. Everything will melt. A bunch of extra support skills here, Orb of Infinite Depth with the Explosive Blast, the Black Hole, the Teleport, and yeah, that's it. You can probably like tweak this a bit for speedruns with like Echoing Fury. I think this should actually be here. And I think one thing that I changed is Gogok to Zaze, because you can actually play this as a ranged a bit, so you get even more damage there. Yeah, overall, Firebird looks like it's going to be back at least. Not really sure if it's going to be better than the Tal Rasha or this DMO stuff, but it does look really powerful. It does look like an insanely good RGK, so we might see a lot of wizards next season again. Here's the Tal Rasha setup that I just mentioned, and it also looks like it has insane meme potential. So the way this works now is that you're mostly going to use the 2-piece bonus to alternate between different skills, and every time you do that, you will call down a meteor of that type. But they removed this 8-second cooldown and instead just said you can't get the same meteor twice in a row. So we don't know how this will work, but my expectation is there's going to be no cooldown, and every time you basically get any kind of damage tick from another element that is not the last damage tick, you will call down a new meteor. So if that is the case, we're going to be raining dozens of meteors a second. It's also going to be glorious, and the stories will evaporate in seconds. So I'm looking forward to that, and hopefully that is how it works, at least, you know, just for the fun of it for a little while. Realistically, this needs some kind of cooldown, I believe, to not be absolutely broken. But yeah, Tal Rasha seems actually super powerful just because of this 2-piece bonus. And there are actually ways to get way more procs than you might have anticipated. For example, you can just do a blizzard and this will continuously tick and trigger cold, for example, or you can even do this with fire, you know, you can change the rune. You can do even magic weapon ignite, and this will apply fire damage to whatever else you're using, like this cold blizzard, or like your, you know, lightning skill or whatever, and will call down the fire meteor. In fact, you can even do Firebird's 2-piece bonus to ignite enemies to also continuously proc the fire meteor. So you just have to attack with basically one element and not with 2 different elements to alternate between them. You can go even further and have something like a Death Wish set up with static discharge. So you just keep channeling this, you keep proccing the ignite with magic weapon, and you have a blizzard at the same time, and there's going to be like meteors flying all over the place, while you also press your explosive blast here and there to get another one. So it's going to look pretty funny if that actually works the way that we imagine it. But let's see, this is definitely going to be one of the first things I'm going to try on the PTR. So the best way around that for the devs would be to just put some kind of cooldown on this 2-piece bonus, maybe like half a second or something like that, so you can like mega abuse these like multi-element combos and not like absolutely annihilate the servers. But this would mean that it would probably be too weak, we'll see. Obviously Death Wish is an issue, so I guess no one really wants a Death Wish build. They buffed the smoldering core in particular to give this like a double staff setup. This is, you know, pretty much exactly what I had actually described, what I would like to see for a meteor-based Tal Rasha build. And I'm really happy that they tried that, but I believe that the numbers are just too small on those meteor weapons. On the other hand, if they buff the meteor weapons themselves, then we have the other issue that Veer still exists, and, you know, LoD reverse Archon builds still exist. And there is actually potential for like reverse Archon Veer builds, for example, or even just including like 2 pieces of Tal Rasha, like the offhand and the amulet or the belt, and for example, proccing those meteors while in Archon form in Veer with just this magic weapon ignite and, you know, whatever, you know, like the beam, for example, from the Archon. So depending on how exactly this 2-piece bonus will be changed, how exactly those numbers will turn out on those staffs, yeah, we might see some really weird setups. Next up is the Trag'Oul. This is also, yeah, very close to copy-paste from my video that I made some months ago about potential like Trag'Oul rework concept that I had in mind. And it basically turned out exactly like that. So we have a Death Nova, Blood Nova build. It's based around the Funerary Pig and Siphon Blood. And essentially the idea is you stand still for a few seconds, you stack up your buffs, and you will have all these like Blood Nova explosions all around you. While doing so, you heal a ton, you will be able to heal your entire health bar in like a second or so, it seems. And that is even excluding any kind of life regen or life per second you might have. And yeah, it's gonna be glorious. It seems really powerful. It seems so powerful, in fact, that there is potential for a Trag'Oul Rats meta, because the set is suddenly gonna be stronger than LoD by around 6 tiers. This setup also has a few shortcomings that might not actually make it better than LoD Rats, but there is definitely potential. So, for example, you can't have Stewart's Greaves, and you can't have the Requiem Ceroplate, which is kind of important for your resource management. But you can make up for the resources by just swapping out Convention for the Circle of Nalush. But then the gain is something like 3 tiers instead of 6 tiers. And it's still going to be kind of slow. But yeah, back to the Nova build, I believe it's going to be very fun and very powerful. So we have the Blood Type Blade as always. And we have a bunch of other new effects that make it more powerful. The set is buffed. So I believe right now Trag'Oul is actually looking like the strongest build. And that even surpasses like this super broken Tal Rasha stuff that I talked about. And even this buffed Firebird magic missile stuff. I believe Trag'Oul is just going to dominate. Especially with this insane AoE potential that comes from the Blood Tide Blade, especially in 4-man. I believe this could be like the next new big trash killer. This could be even like really solid for like a 2-man with a Bard, for example. So you can have insane combos. You can do both AoE and single target and just have an overall pretty well-rounded setup that is not reliant on lots of cooldown reduction, that is not relying on resource costs, and also has fairly okay toughness, it seems. Finally, there are also some other builds that are affected by either those set changes or the season theme. One of those is the DMO Twister build, which is overall fairly solid. I believe it's somewhere in A tier or so. I like pushing DMO Twister a lot personally, even though it's not like one of those absolute god tier builds. And now with those changes that we have where the slow time is cast automatically from the 2-piece bonus, you don't actually need to have slow time on your bar anymore. And potentially you get like insane amounts of teleport resets, so you're like way more mobile. And even though the damage of the set wasn't exactly improved, it did get some more damage reduction and this utility that will definitely make it slightly better. And for example, removing slow time will allow you to get something like Wave of Force Arcane Attunement, which is actually used in the LoD variants of Twister. So now you can make a big pull and get this 4% extra damage for your next Twister, and you can use this as a snapshot to cast your other Twisters into it. And yeah, potentially I think we're gonna see a buff of something like 3, 4, 5 tiers or so, simply because of this very small 2-piece change. I think that will make DMO even more fun to play, both in pushing and especially in farming. It's gonna be a pretty formidable like Twister set. And I guess it does open up some more potential for other, especially LoD builds in the future for wizards. Aside from this, there's also some potential for a DMO magic missile set, at least in Season 27. So similar to the Firebirds, you shoot like 20 magic missiles now and you can just go ham with that. I don't think it's gonna be very like powerful. I don't think it's gonna be like the meta on DMO or anything like that. But it might be a fun alternative, especially if you like those slow time bubbles and if you don't want to rely on the disintegrate of Firebirds. It's definitely going to be weaker than Firebirds. I tried to estimate it and it seems to be something like a 15 tier difference or so. So kind of large, but considering that Firebirds will be flying high, this will still be kind of solid. So this is a setup that Silveretta sent to me after I had like kind of mapped it out before without making it. But this is basically how it should look like. And if you want to check that out, here it is as well. And finally, a last setup that I want to highlight is the one made by Sepki, which is a Strafe Cluster Arrow LoD Demon Hunter. So LoD Demon Hunter mostly has rapid fire and lots of memes. So these days, no one really wants to play that anymore. So there is definitely some potential to try out these new effects. So even though there were no changes to Demon Hunters themselves, they do have the season theme effects. And one of that is based around strafe, shooting your hated spenders. So here we can make like a manticore cluster arrow setup, even with cluster bombs. So you can just like, strafe around in the middle of a big pack and those grenades will just fly everywhere. So that could potentially be, maybe close enough or maybe even beating rapid fire to where we might get a bit of like a different meta on some of those set leaderboards. Obviously, there's a lot to see on this PTR, so this doesn't exactly cover everything, and we're probably gonna get like 1 or 2 updates as well. So for example, this Guardian set here, I expect is gonna get a big rework. We're probably gonna get some tweaks to, like Akkhan and Trag'Oul and Tal Rasha especially, I guess. So who knows, but I expect all of the new stuff will overall be on like the stronger side at least. Especially with Crusaders, with their recent nerfs. They definitely deserve to get something. And I guess we also might see some big updates to those Witch Doctor like season theme powers, because all of them seem extremely weak and not really like fitting into like most of the builds. And on top of this, Witch Doctor didn't get any other changes. So I expect that those will be like reworked in some way. Obviously, even if you don't jump on the PTR yourself, I'm going to keep you guys updated about, all the developments, about the memes, about the builds that we make. And let's see where it will go for Season 27 launch. Personally, I'm quite excited for it. I think this overall looks really good already. Some really broken stuff will come out of it, on the PTR at least. So that is for sure. And Let's see. If you have any questions about the meta and what will be the best class and all that stuff, then, you know, reserve those for later, because no one can tell you. Literally, we have no clue, because most of the stuff is untested and we don't know any numbers and how crazy it is. I can just give like my gut feeling on what I believe will be good. So we're gonna have monks, we're gonna have necros, we're gonna have wizards, and those will probably be absolutely blasting in the season, unless, you know, some other stuff gets extremely buffed or those get extremely nerfed. So this is my like assessment for now, and we'll see where we'll end up. So hope you enjoyed this video. I have all the links to the setups that I talked about here in the description. Otherwise, you can also go find the patch notes here, there as well. And as always, thanks for watching. Subscribe for all the other content, and I'll see you guys next time.